Welcome back to the podcast. Gabe, Yanez, and I, we are joined with an awesome guest today, Jason House. Jason, he's been in the fight game for a long time, and I'm super interested in chatting with you about all things being an agent, having an agency, the fight game, up and coming therapies for fighters and for individuals, dads who want to be fit and capable. But I think a great place to start with this conversation is I want to congratulate you. I know that you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I saw that online. And what an incredible, incredible win. I mean, it was a little bit boring for me, towards the fourth quarter. You guys even put in your backup quarterback. But I'm sure for you as an Eagles fan, you're like, dude, I'll take this 10 times out of 10. So congratulations on the Super Bowl win. It fired me up for you.
Heck yeah. No, I'm excited for the Eagles. I'm a big Jalen Hurts fan, so it was really cool to see his whole story come full circle with the Super Bowl victory. It's amazing. He's the definition of perseverance in my book.
Are you based in the East Coast now? Are you in Philadelphia? Always been East Coast?
No,
where are you right now?
Actually, I'm born and raised from Cali, live in Las Vegas now. I just always followed Jalen Hurts, just through when he got benched at Alabama, then he transferred to Oklahoma. He never said anything negative. He just handled adversity so well. I was like, man, this guy is really inspiring to me. And so I've always just followed his journey. So when he got to the Eagles, I just became an Eagles fan.
Oh, that's so funny.
Where in California were you from, Jason?
I was from Diamond Bar, which is about maybe 20 minutes outside of LA.
Okay. Wait, so with Jalen Hurts, I'm not, people who listen to our show, they know that I'm not the biggest sports guy. I don't keep up with anything. I'm definitely what you would call a fair weather fan. If the Niners are in the Super Bowl, all of a sudden you see me rocking Niners gear. If the Sharks are in the, the cup, I'm wearing it.
Yeah.
What's up with Hurts, and why did you get so engaged? I mean, you briefly mentioned it now, but what to him stands out for you? Is it his character? Obviously he went out. Dude, I watched his post game talk. He was just very, very low key, trying to highlight others and not make it about himself was what I gathered from it, knowing nothing about the guy.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love him. I just feel like he's a selfless leader, but just when he got benched in the national championship game in college and he handled it with such grace, a lot of young men that age probably would have started pointing fingers or complaining, and he didn't. He was very positive about the whole situation, even when Tua took over the starting spot and he had to transfer to Oklahoma. I just felt like this whole time, whatever has come his way, he's used it for a positive. Any adversity that he had in his life, he made a character building opportunity. And I think any time in life you can see someone doing that, that's someone you should, follow and keep in touch with, and just see their journey.
Yeah,
man, it's interesting because I feel like sports fandom, at least this is the case for me. I'm originally from New York, so I'm big, Mets, Giants, weird combination, Knicks fan. But I feel like a lot of times sports fandom, that's why I asked her if you were from the East Coast or based in the East Coast, it's kind of based on your area, your location, where you grew up. You don't hear so much hey, it was this player, his character, how he composed himself, and that brought me to the team. And then I'm curious then if that has any connection to how you got into MMA management and helping athletes and kind of helping individuals. And did that come before or after? And what I mean by that is, did you always kind of really appreciate what makes certain athletes unique and want to get into that world? Or was it the other way around? You were kind of hey, this is a really cool player. And then you got into representing these fighters.
Yeah, so I had done football, wrestling, and baseball in high school. I played baseball in college for 4 years. And so when that ended, it really was hard for me. I went to law school, and I just was kind of missing the camaraderie of being with the guys. And there's Sunday league baseball, there's stuff of that nature, but it's once a week and it's seasonal. I was kind of looking for, when you're in college, you train every day with your team. So I was looking for something like that. And there was an MMA gym down the street from my law school. So I just signed up for it. And I fell in love with it, just going every day to the gym and training and being with the guys. And eventually I just realized that there was kind of a market space right then for agents. The sport was only, not very old, and there wasn't a lot of agencies around. And so I just started helping the fighters at our gym.
Huh. Jason, just to kind of, I don't want to say back up, but just you touched on something and then you kind of breezed over it. You wrestled, you played, were you playing 3 sports in high school?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a 3-sport athlete in high school, and then this is very interesting to me. So I have a almost 11-year-old son and almost 14-year-old daughter, and my wife and I have been together for a long time. And my son's heavily into sports, all the things, right? Just but it's a really point of contention or a point of discussion around my friend circle about when to start, kind of like focusing more on a single sport. How many sports should kids be doing? How do you not have them burnt out? I'm curious from your perspective, playing 3 sports in high school. I did track and football, but the 3 is pretty rare, especially like with the wrestling background, dude. Like that's awesome. Incredible. Yeah. Do you feel like that was the right way to go for you? Or do you think that if you had been a little bit more focused on baseball a little bit earlier, you might have been even better than you were? And I'm not saying you weren't great because you went and played in college. I'm just using that as an example, or maybe wrestling or whatever it was.
I definitely think that's a very, very good question. I discussed it. My nephew's 3 right now. We already got him in wrestling, and I've already had these thoughts in my head of how this works. I mean, you look at the NFL draft and you see that I think it was 80%, 85% of the guys drafted in the first round played multiple sports in high school, right?
Right.
But then I also see situations like you say in the wrestling community where I feel like a lot of the kids that have success are ones that are kind of doing it almost year round. So I think it's a balancing act. I do see the pros of doing multiple sports because you're learning, you're picking up different athletic traits, right? You're learning different techniques, different movements. So I think that's good for a young adolescent. But I see the pros and cons to both. When I actually growing up, baseball was like everything to me. It was my one obsession. I wanted to play baseball every day and twice on Sunday if I could. And then when I got to high school, actually, it was the athletic director that was like, hey, you need to do football. You need to do wrestling. You need to, I'm like, say less. Whatever you think is going to give me the best route to success, and I think they kind of looked at you need to buy into the culture of our school and be in sports year round, and I thought it benefited me, but I see the pros and cons to both. And my partner, Jeremy at the agency, his son, it was like my nephew was, I think number 1, number 2 in the country in wrestling out of high school. And he loved football, played through the first couple years of high school, but eventually he had to stop and just solely focus on wrestling, So I know for me personally, I did the 3 sports for 3 years. My senior year, I did not wrestle because going into my senior year of baseball, I had to have a good year to get to play in the next level, right? Like my junior year, I think I had 1 at bat. Our team was ranked 13th in the country by Baseball America. We had so many Division I players on that team, so I didn't see much action. So I really didn't have an opportunity to showcase my skills in my junior year. So it was kind of this was like a do or die my senior year. But I definitely wonder the same things all the time. What is the best route in going? I think playing multiple sports though was good for me. It was a good head change to get out of one sport and go to another. And it was good to learn different techniques and different skills.
Jason, one thing you mentioned, and I'm curious what you meant by it, is, you're super young, you're in high school, you're just kind of figuring stuff out. You said you talked to your athletic director and he was the one that said, hey, get into football, get into wrestling. You were like, hey, I'm game for whatever is going to help me be successful. What did that mean for you at the time? As a high school kid, what was the success that you were aiming for at that age? I'm super curious.
In my high school, we had a very successful sports program.
Okay.
Football.
So you wanted to win.
Yeah. Football, I don't think lost a game for 2.5 years. Baseball was ranked nationally. Wrestling was winning league. So growing up when I was in middle school, that high school was everything to me, and I saw the kids go to play in college. That was my goal. So I literally walked into his office and yo, I want the best experience. What do I need to do to be a guy here? I want to be a guy here. Tell me what to do. The athletic director's name was Ray Moore. And he was just you got to play year round. I'm done. Whatever you need me to do, I'm going to do. If you tell me sit in my head, I'll sit in my head. I want to be, I think it was one of the kids my age. I think it was Darren Spicer. I think his brother was was it Joseph Spicer? His older brother was the quarterback. So we were always looking up to him, and he was playing multiple sports. And I in my mind, I'm okay, I need to be like that. I just need to get straight A's, play 3 sports, and just be a stud.
I love this. I'm so curious. What I want to keep digging. What was it parents? Was it the community that you were around? Was it all your friends? What do you think gave you that right? Fire, that culture that young? Yeah.
It was the culture of the community. I'll be honest, my parents didn't play sports. I think my dad was actually in the band. They were obviously super supportive of me. I mean, my dad, if I told him, he was all in with whatever I wanted to do. But it was the culture of the community, right? Our Little League won the Little League World Series. That city that I grew up in, I got very lucky. My parents moved there, and that city was all about winning. And so I just want to be a part of it. I just love sports growing up. I was obsessed with sports. So that community I just really took to. And, when I was in elementary school, we were going to high school football games. You know what I mean? Like you're going to those games and you're seeing those guys and you're like, man, I can't wait till I get to play on Friday nights, and I can't wait till I get to wrestle in these matches or have these big baseball games. So it was really exciting to us.
That's awesome. I love the idea of the culture talk, because that permeates, I think, through everything. You know, when you have a culture that's set in the city,
yes,
you know, something that we've been doing here in my local city is I've been hosting a free men's club in a parking lot for almost 2 years now.
Wow.
And we just get, on average right now, we get about 50 guys to train in a parking lot every week. And talk about culture, right? Is like, what I'm trying to do is start permeating this culture of doing hard things. And what you're talking about is like, and some people, they might not align with that culture. Like, you know, maybe they don't align with it, and maybe that city's not for them. But for the people that city is for them, and that culture, it's like everybody's trying to level up. And yeah, sure, they want to win, but as a byproduct of wanting to win, think about all the things these young men and young women are getting exposed to, just to kind of like the adversity, I love all things sport for kids.
I mean, they had me looking forward to 6 a.m. lifts. Like 6 a.m. lifts at our school was like this legendary thing where they pumped the music up. And I mean, our weight room was beautiful. Our school colors are purple gold. All the weights, everything, all the benches were all put on the floor. I mean, it was like, it was unreal. Like, I mean, how many kids want to get up at 6 a.m. and lift? But they had me sold on it. When I was in 8th grade, I was itching like, I can't wait until I finish middle school, then I can go do these lifts with all these guys. You're like, I mean, you said if you're surrounded by it, it's like second nature. It becomes cool, right? You're like, oh, I want to do these things.
Man, go ahead, Gabe. Yeah.
Does that now? Is there any downside to that? And because we've talked about this with, like, you know, kid sports and stuff, and your experience in high school, has that led to any of the, like, just level of pressure now that maybe is doing a little bit more harm than good for some young up and coming athletes? Or did you see it done in a way that was mostly positive? And then how do you mitigate the downsides of just like this pressure to perform that some kids just can't handle?
I think it's a good experience for a child to learn that at a young age, because when he gets into the real world, that's what he's going to see. And maybe it is too much pressure at that time and he doesn't have success in that moment, but he can learn from that and grow from that, because at some point he has to be, it's like a virus, right? He has to get exposed to somewhat of that virus at some point. You know, you might as well expose it to the child then, so he builds up the antibodies for it then, because he has to learn how to deal with it. It's better to start having them move forward in that progression as a young adult than wait till they're 19, 20 and the real world smacks them in the face and it goes, hey, like, you didn't perform this year, this quarter, or I'm sorry, we're gonna have to let you go. And don't get me wrong, it was high pressure. You're 100% right. And it was high stress. And there was days I would be in second period nervous as hell for that match that night or that game. But I also think it brought out good in me. And I think it's helped me to be in this stage today that I'm at. And I mean, it's still some of the best memories of my life are with those guys, because you're going through it too with like-minded people. I think it's better to do it. I guess to even better answer your question, it's better to do it with like-minded people your age at that time than to do it by yourself as an adult, right? It's better to have that circle of people, your community. I mean, because you got to think, those parents, those kids, you played sports with those same parents, kids for 10 years. You know what I mean? They've seen you. I mean, you had a huge community of support there.
Yeah, that we put that post, Gabe, like the pressure post that's coming up, or like pressure is a privilege. That's what it was, right? Yeah. It's like,
because something's expected of you.
Because something's expected of you. Like, and that's cool. Like, that means that you've done something. I want to ask though, Jason, you're going through this school experience. I'm like having this vision of like Varsity Blues meets De La Salle Academy. You know De La Salle meets like, and like just Varsity Blue, mobbing down the street in the buses, and dude, wrestling is no joke. Obviously, I mean, those are some of the hardest workers in the world. I think wrestlers and rowers are just built different, especially at a young age. But you come out of high school, and I imagine at that point, it was like you get into college and you still feel like you're winning because you're on a collegiate baseball team. You're still a competitor, and then boom, it goes away. My journey has been a little bit different than that, just because of some life circumstances and whatnot. But I don't know what it's like to be like boom, 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 boom. You're like high functioning individual, and then bam, it ends, and then you go to law school. And so I guess you finding this MMA gym and finding this culture for a guy out there who's listening, who maybe was into sports in high school, maybe didn't play in college, but they still have like this earning to like do hard things with other guys. They miss that brotherhood, that camaraderie. You found at the MMA gym, they could find it at a bunch of different places. I mean, I'd love to dive into that camaraderie piece that drew you into MMA.
Yeah, because I feel like JB from First Form, he told me the other day on a podcast, he said like rules are meant to be broken, standards are meant to be upheld. And that really resonated with me, because I feel like if you're on your own, you're creating rules for yourself, right? Like, oh, I'm going to get up, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to eat this. But if you are within a community, you're kind of upholding the standard of the community. So for me, I was looking to continue in that journey of being in high standards with the community. So going to MMA gym that had a 6 a.m. class was perfect. I could get that feeling out and then go to school and be productive. And I just feel like for a lot of young adults and older adults, like they're kind of missing a purpose, right? In some aspects, and you're part of a team and you're part of even if just competing in weekend tournaments or whatever, it still keeps you improving and you're growing both physically and mentally.
Yeah. Why law school?
My sophomore year in college, I took a speech communication class and I gave a speech to the class, and the professor there, who actually changed my life, he was like, "Hey, you should come join the debate team." And I'm like, "Nah, man, I'm just here to play baseball and get a degree." And he's like, "Man, you should come." He's like, "Friday nights we meet here, we have pizza and beer and we'll do a couple debates. You should just come." I'm like, "Nah, I'm just here to do baseball." And he kept bugging me. So one time I came, really loved it, started getting really into it. And the debate team at my college actually was really good, or kind of world renowned. And he kind of led me down that path of going to law school and being an advocate, being a vocal advocate for others. And so that's what made me, sign up for law school. And then when I went there, it just kind of took over.
I was going to say, I'm really curious, because I think you give us a different perspective than a lot of guests that we've had on the podcast. Like one conversation that's come up a lot. We've had a lot of men that have gone the homeschool route. We've had a lot of conversations about, college and like, is it worth a huge investment? And this being like a pretty kind of like spinning your wheels experience for a lot of young men, specifically nowadays. But hearing you say that you had this professor that had a huge impact on your life, like changed your life, got you into law school, which is clearly a big step to now the success you have as an agent. What's your opinion there, having experienced what I think is maybe best case scenario of going down the traditional route? What's your kind of take on college now? Is it worth it? Is it not? I'd love to hear that.
That's a very good question. And I go back and forth on this. I sometimes wonder if some of the teachings in college are a little outdated, right? At least when I was there, like the first 2 years, you're doing math, Spanish, history, you kind of regurgitating high school a little bit. But it's the network and the people that you get to be around in college and law school, right? Like being around the people that I was in college, like those are some of my best friends today. Like they're the ones that are my accountants now, my financial advisors now. Like you stay in your circle. So it puts you in a great position. And when you start taking other curriculum courses, right? Like I did, I took a speech communication class that obviously changed the course of my life. And even going to law school, right? Where with AI technology and the way that, technology works today, you probably don't need to memorize laws as much as you needed to at one point, right? But you're in a circle of people that are a very high level of people to be at law school, right? A lot of their family members or parents are attorneys at firms, the connections, it's all networking. And I think going to college really helps you do that. Obviously, I had the opportunity of baseball, and, my college coach is a huge mentor in my life. My strength and conditioning coach, I still talk to almost daily. These people really help shape who I am. And I feel too, if you were playing sports, it continued my progression in teamwork and dealing with adversity and competing. It helped keep defining that area of my life by playing 4 more years.
Yeah. The law school, the college, it's interesting because when I hear you talk, so I went, so Gabe and I both went to, college. We went I'd say I went like a very traditional-ish route, private Catholic school, then into like private this. And then I graduated from a 4-year university with a degree in business. And then I ended up opening up a business right out of college.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you bring it up, because is there a different or a better way to get what you were saying is the main value from college? It's something I'm thinking about with my kids. So, because my daughter's about to turn 14. 100%. And I'm thinking as she's going through high school, if the real value in college is like, hey, you're learning independency, you're connecting, you're networking, you're around like-minded people that want to level up, all these different things, right? That you've spoke about. Is there other ways of doing that? Can you get that at an MMA gym? Can you get that at, I don't know. It's just something that have you found that at other places, or you think that the collegiate environment is unique in itself?
I think it's different strokes for different folks. And I think you're 100% right. I think there's some people that at 18, 19 can get into the work world, make those connections. They know what they want to do. You know, every there's many ways to skin that cat. And I think you're 100% right. I don't think it's as cookie cutter maybe as it was maybe 15, 20 years ago, where it was you go to high school and you go to college, right? Like that's how we were all kind of raised, right? Like you have to do this. I don't think it has to be that way at all anymore. I think you're 100% right. And I think the opportunities that are presented in our world today, you don't have to go to college. For me, I just know in that moment, like I wanted 4 more years of baseball. Like I would have ran over my mom at home plate if it meant getting 4 more years of baseball, right? Like I really, and it luckily, like I'm a blessed man that it led me to get the opportunities I've gotten through college. But I agree with you. I've seen people go to 4 years of college, walk out of it, and then completely pivot step, which was the correct step for them, right? And find their passion, find what they're meant to do, but had nothing to do with, probably didn't have to go to school, right? So you're right. I see both sides of it. And, you know, while with my god kids and my nephews and nieces, I always kind of wonder, like, I wonder if, you know, by the time another 10, 15 years when they're about to finish high school, if college is going to be as heralded as it once was when I was a kid, right?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask about that, like, in terms of when you're in college and finding MMA and finding jiu-jitsu, because you have your black belt in jiu-jitsu, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What do you? I mean, I love jiu-jitsu, so you know, I'm getting Gabe on the plan. So I competed professionally in CrossFit for a long time, and then I found jiu-jitsu about 9 years ago. So I've been doing it ever since, and I love it. I think the lessons you learn on the mats are like incredible,
priceless.
So I'm curious, just from your perspective, why did you navigate primarily to jiu-jitsu? Did that call you, or did MMA call you more? And if so, what called to you more? And do you think MMA is something you could actually do for the long term, or is it too much, and that's why you found jiu-jitsu? You know what I mean? I'm curious that balance. You know.
So at the time, I had a college baseball teammate of mine called me to his house during my first semester of law school. We went to his house to watch a UFC fight. I watched the fights. I'm like, oh man, this is awesome. I want to learn how to do this. Yeah. I called MMA gym. And seeing how like the classes and everything were structured, they had a 6 a.m. jiu-jitsu class. So that's kind of why I went jiu-jitsu. I was like, okay, well, 6 a.m. I can do this, shower there, and go to class. Perfect. Just like I used to do in high school and college. It's the same drill, rinse and repeat. I do feel jiu-jitsu is something that you can continue to practice in your later years of your life, right? Some aspects MMA will be a little harder on the body as you get a little bit older. I think you'd have to really curtail it if you're going to do that type of training to have the right people around you and the right training modules in place for you to keep doing that if you want to make that a weekly desire, right? If you wanted to train MMA, because you're not going to be taking that many hard blows to the head at 45, 50 years old. You have to be very strategic in your training at that age. But I feel like jiu-jitsu, like there's a group of guys back home in California that I went white belt to black belt with, where, they're a little bit older than me. But they were like mentors and big brothers, and we still get on the mat. We still roll. We know how to have a good time and still be competitive, but also in a manner that, we can get up and train the next day. Because I think at our age, the goal is to be able to train the next day. That's what you're really looking to do, is keep staying on the mat as consistent as possible. Because it's really, like you said, it's a good thing for mental health, I think, for me to get on the mat and get a sweat and have that release and feel good about myself when I'm done.
Yeah.
I think it was Mark Zuckerberg on Rogan that was talking about exactly that. Like, he got started doing a lot of MMA stuff, but now he's doing more BJJ because he was like, I probably have to save some brain cells given, what he does for his work. So,
yeah, I think with the MMA style, so for me, I started off in Muay Thai and then I found Jiu-Jitsu. And so I have some striking, but dude, to your point, like, I'll never forget the last time I was sparring in Muay Thai. Not the last time, but one of the last times. I got kicked in the face so hard. And the guy was wearing shin guards, but it's still, dude, I'll never forget leaving that gym, just be like, fuck, I got messed up today. Yeah. And it just sucked, like it just sucked. In jiu-jitsu, of course, you get submitted and this and that and whatever, but you don't get kicked in the face. Yeah. it's just something I couldn't do for the long term. So talk to us a little bit about your journey going from like, excited about MMA, excited about jiu-jitsu, seeing the growth of the sport and having a law background, and now doing what you're doing. And how's that evolved? Like, how did you start what you were doing?
So it actually, it's funny you say this. It kind of goes back to your 2 questions ago when you asked me about like the necessity for college, because I was in law school. I was working at a construction defect firm. I didn't really feel like the culture of that firm fit what I was about. Not a lot of job satisfaction there. Long hours. A lot of the attorneys I worked with had multiple divorces. That was not on my bingo card list to get divorced in my life. And I was doing the district attorney's office, and I liked that, but I think Schwarzenegger had passed a bill at the time that cut like the workforce by 10%. So they said they couldn't hire me for 18 months. So in my mind, I was like, man, I just went to school for 7 years. Back then, and you guys all know this, it's like 7 years of school, you're supposed to be like rewarded. I paid the price. I got these degrees. I passed the bar exam. I'm supposed to know what I want to do, and I didn't. And so I was panicking, and I was like, man, I wonder if this 7 years of school was for nothing. In that moment, I was thinking that, like, man, what am I doing? And then a sports agent came to my school, like probably within the last couple months of my law school career. He came at the very last moment, spoke. I blew up his phone for the next week, got an internship there. He was representing MMA fighters. I was already training MMA. Within a week, he had me at a UFC event backstage, managing guys. And I was like, dude, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm called to do. And so when I finished taking the bar exam, I told my pops, I was like, hey, I don't want to take any of these job offers. I'm miserable. Like, I could not do this. It was like the movie Office Space, right? I was putting sheets on TPS reports. It was brutal. And he said, okay, well, give it 2 years, move back home, get a job and give it 2 years. And if it takes off in 2 years, great. And if not, at least, that law firm job will always be there for you. So I literally, as an attorney, I worked at Outback Steakhouse from 6 to 10 every night. And I was doing 9 to 5 as an agent for 2 years, starting
But how cool, just to kind of, not to interrupt. I mean, I interrupt you because, dude, how cool is that about your dad? Yeah. I had a very similar experience. And I just think, like, shout out to your dad, man, and Gabe's dad and my dad. And I do not take it. And I hope every guy listening, like, dude, if your dad is supportive of you, man, not every dad is. And like, shout out to those dads, and you should tell them that more. And that's something I'm taking away from even this conversation right now is like, when I, because I graduated from 4-year university and I had been applying for finance jobs, and I'll never forget. I told my dad, I'm like, dude, I want to start a gym. And at the time, it was just so non-conventional, like, wait, you want to go start like in a warehouse? You want to go start a gym? Like, he came from Iran, whatever. And he was just like, all right, let's go do it. And it's like, fuck. I mean, imagine if your dad, Jason, had told you like, no, you have to get this law, which maybe you wouldn't have done what you did, like, who knows? Anyways. No, I'll let you keep going. I just want to bring that up.
You're right, because in those early years, I'd be looking at my friends, and they were renting nice condos in Newport Beach, and they were driving Beamers, and I was like, damn, I'm living at home, sleeping in the same bed I slept in high school. I'm serving tables as an attorney, and I'm like, I'm an attorney. I shouldn't be serving tables. But then my dad would say, like, man, how much fun did you have last weekend at that fight when your guy won? I was like, oh, Dad, it was the greatest. And he was like, well, just keep riding that feeling and keep doing those things, and it'll take off. And then thank God it did.
Man. One of the most like aspirational pieces that seem to be incredibly common in a lot of success stories. And I don't think people realize how long 2 years is for just not seeing the fruits of your labor, because now you telling the story, it's a blip in the radar, right? Like, it's just, we spent 2 minutes on it. It's like, I did this thing for 2 years. Dude, it's 2 years. Yeah. 2 years, right? Where like, there's nothing but uncertainty of like, is this going to be a thing? And I'm sure there were glimpses along the journey of like, oh, this could be something. But I'm sure there were also times where it's like, dude, this does not look good, right?
I emailed the UFC every day about the same, every Monday for 8 months. And it took them 8 months. Like, there was points I was like, I'm never going to get a guy in the UFC. Like, how am I ever going to make a living? Like, we're fighting at these local, like the first fight I ever booked was in Cortez, Colorado. My fighter got $300 to show, $200 to win. So he made $500. I took 10%, and I had to drive 11 hours from California to Cortez. I told you lost.
You definitely lost money on gas alone.
Yeah,
I just listened to you telling that story. That's so funny. It was actually 300 a show, 200 to win, which is strange to me. Like it's more to show than it even is to win. But
I mean, you're right though. In the moment, it seemed forever. In the moment, and now you look back on it, and we can laugh and we can have a good story here. But in the time, you're like, oh man, like I didn't even have money to take out a girl at that point. I was so broke.
Jason, is that pretty normal for like agency and fight game? I'm unfamiliar with it. In the CrossFit space, there's definitely like an agency fee on sponsorships and endorsements, but they're not taking fees. Like if I went and competed at an event in CrossFit, I wouldn't have to pay a fee. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you're booking these fights, is that how agents in the fight game typically will get paid, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you get a percentage of the fights you book for them. You get a percentage of the sponsorships or endorsements or appearances or seminars that you book for them. And so, like back then, the money, the sport was just starting out. So you're really robbing Peter to pay Paul a lot of times. I'd serve tables, make a few $100, and then, go spend that money to recruit a client and take them out to dinner or go drive to an event. There really isn't a whole lot there. They're not making much. So you're definitely, if you're only getting a cut of what they're making, you're not making very much at all either. So, but, definitely the pay has changed over the course of the years and it's gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
Just one quick way, when you decided that like, hey, definitely want to be a sports agent representing athletes and your baseball background, did that ever cross your mind of like going that route or not really? Time. It was like MMA, this is what I want to do.
It definitely crossed my mind. I even had my NFL license for a while and I repped a few NFL players. It's just MMA, like, I don't know how to, you train MMA, so in the gyms, like those guys, they're just, man, you want to get out of bed and work your butt off for them. Like I just was so passionate about their plight, about their journey. I just knew like this is my calling. Like and plus too, you had to think when I was coming in the MMA side, like I ended up getting a market share, which it'd be very hard to get a market share right now in NFL or MLB. Here the sport was just starting out. I actually, I don't know if you read the book. I think it was Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Like I was able to enter at the right time. I was in the right place in the right. If I would have graduated law school 2 years later, I don't think I would be where I am today. Even with the same work ethic, same everything, I really entered into space at a perfect time.
So take us through that journey now. So you have an agency that represents primarily MMA fighters, and what does that look like? I mean, how did you build that? And I want to know more about it because I don't know enough about the backside of the fight game. I'll watch John Jones or, I'll watch like a UFC fight here and there and I'm engaged on it. I definitely watch. I'm curious your thoughts on like CGI and ADCC. I don't know how much you're involved on that, but how has your business evolved over the years and where is it currently at today? Like who are you representing from a fight perspective?
Again, this will go back to your question earlier about the necessity of college. This will come back again because I felt like the first year outside of school, I learned more then. Like it was such a like starting an LLC, right? Like getting your QuickBooks up and running. How do you build a business? Like what employee staff? What's your overhead? Like those things are not taught in school. I'm sure you know this as well. If you went from college and I'm open a gym business, like you don't realize the daily cost of all of it. So I was learning so much. And it's really just through trial and error and constantly seeing how other agencies and other sports like, okay, well, let's form a PR department. Let's go hire a PR director. Let's form a marketing department. Let's have someone handle the regional events. Have someone handle these events. We need more attorneys on staff. You're constantly evolving, trying to figure out the right thing. And because our sport's only 33 years old, 32 years old, there's no real blueprint to follow. You're kind of, you're trailblazing yourself in this market space and trying to create something that, you'd be proud of when you look back at it.
What was the, where was the inflection point? Like at what point did it go from, waiting the tables and, robbing Peter to pay Paul to like, okay, this is turning into something. What was the moment?
In February of 2011, So I graduated law school in May of 2009. So we're approaching the 2-year mark. I had to borrow $1,200 to cover the bills for my dad, and it broke me. I hated having to ask him, and it really, really, really crushed me. And so I was sitting back going like, dude, like I'm done. Like this is it. Like I'm, 25. I graduated law school at 23. So I'm 25. I can't even pay my bills. Like this is ridiculous. And it was a weekend. We had just gotten out of church and I'd asked my dad and I was all embarrassed. And I was like, man, I'm done. I don't know. I'm gonna start looking at other things. My dad's like, calm down. You know what I mean? Just pay me back when you can. And that Monday, the UFC responded to me and said, hey, my client's name was Ruben Duran. He goes, what is Ruben Duran doing? And like a complete dork, I responded like in probably 3 seconds. I go, waiting for your phone call, sir. Like, excited, like,
He's doing anything you want him to be doing. Yeah.
Like, what do you need? And so like, I think Sean took like 2 hours to respond. And I'm over here like, well, what does that mean? Is he going to sign my guy? And so he said, hey, can you fight in 2 weeks in Kentucky for the UFC? I said, yes, we'll be there. We took the fight. Randomly, my commission was $1,200, which paid back that debt. They gave Ruben a bonus, which I got a percentage of, which helped keep me afloat. And Ruben had fought so well. Like he had fought amazing. Like he went out there and just threw down. And the matchmaker, Sean, was like, well, who else do you have? And I'm like, oh, I got, Bobby Green, I got Cisco Rivera, and I got Ian McCall. I was like, dude, I love those guys. And he just started signing them. And then everything just started like, it just started finally, you know what I mean? And once you get one guy in, and once the fighters can see that you can get them to the promised land, then it was like, it was so much easier recruiting. You're putting multiple guys in. And I was like, oh my gosh, just when I was about to break, it finally, came through. And then by the end of 2011, I was finally starting to get above water and just get to a good space.
What a cool story.
I love the $1,200 and that the fact that was $1,200 when you came out. And the fact that
I was like, oh,
yeah.
Well, that kind of prompts me to want to ask. I know that this is something we talk to a lot of our guests on the podcast. You even mentioned, heading out of church when you were talking to your dad, and I know faith is a big part of, your life, and it's been, kind of a big bedrock. I've completely, like, it's funny. My wife used to talk about this all the time. Like, I was just like, coincidences happen. She was like, no, coincidences don't happen. Like,
no.
How much of that, like, even down to the dollar, your commission being like what you owed your dad and that being what you had to borrow at the moment where you were like, hey, this is it. Like, I'm going to look for something else. Like, dude, how much of that is coincidence and how much of that is just like, you having faith and it turning around when it needs to turn around?
No, it was definitely a sign from God. It was definitely his way of saying, hey, you're sticking to it.
Oh, man.
Like I knew in that moment, the minute, like, cause I didn't know what the pay was. I never had a UFC fighter. So I don't know what the pay is. The minute they said the pay, and I was like, I just started laughing. I was like, imagine if like, why are you laughing? I'm just sitting here like, oh my gosh, like this
because you didn't know if it was going to be 10%, 12%. Like it was already pre-structured with them. Is that the way it worked?
Yeah. Like I didn't know. I never had a UFC. So I didn't know what they pay for the first fight in the UFC. So I didn't even know what I was going to make.
Oh, right? Okay. Yeah. Cause you had your percent locked in with the fighter, but you didn't know what they pay the fighter.
Exactly. So the minute they told me the pay, and I just started laughing. I was like, man, okay, God, you answered my prayer. Cause not even 24 hours earlier, I was sitting in church like, yo, I need help. Like, I'm struggling. This is hard. Because, you go out with your friends on the weekends and they'd be like picking up my tab because they're so successful, right? Like, they're driving nice whips. I had a Hyundai with like 275,000 miles on it. Like, it just was getting to a point of like, this is not looking good. You need to always have an ego death and kill your ego and just do what makes you happy in life. But it's hard sometimes when you're that young age and you're being surrounded by your friends with success. And you're like, man, I'm still eating dinner with my parents every night. Like, I don't even have my own place.
It takes a certain type of person to have that grit. A really good friend of mine, I came out of college and we saw some pretty fast success because I was competing and opening the gym. And a buddy of mine was going to med school and I just watched him just like, dude, he was grinding, but he didn't get it at the time. I was telling him, day after day, bro, you are inspiring me. You are, because he was inspiring me because he was doing it when it wasn't cool to do it. Meaning like he was putting in the work every day for like this distant thing, It's kind of like the way I look at working out. Like it's delayed gratification, right?
Yes,
You're putting in this work every day. And I think that you got to respect someone who puts in the work every day and not getting a damn thing out of it, So shout out to you, man. That's awesome.
You're a good friend because I know that the friends that were telling me like, hey, don't worry. Like, we got you. Like, dude, this is gonna be so cool. Like, and they were going to my little events that little fights I was having for my guys. Like, you need those people, just a couple people. It's like, hey, you're doing good. Like, keep going. Like, trust me, like, And now it pays off, and now those friends still come to the big fights, and it's cool to see them. You know, our guys headlining a UFC card. You're like, it's cool to have them there, and have nice dinners together and talk about those times.
Yeah, I think some of that too. The delayed gratification, I think, all stems from sports.
Yeah.
And the way you're raised, right? Like with you, with wrestling, with football, with baseball, any of those. I'm watching it. My son plays pretty competitive baseball for his age, right?
Nice. Nice.
And watching these boys, like, dude, they want to be someone else, but they're not there yet. They got to put in the work. They want to, better batting average or whatever it is, but it's like they gotta hit the cage every day, and then they go to the game and they still strike out. And it's like, but I think that teaches some really valuable lessons that then carry over into the business world, because you're not going to just wake up tomorrow and see instant success. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. No, I think it's so good that your son is learning that at that age. I feel like, baseball is a sport that's going to test you mentally time and time again. I used to struggle. If I had a good first at bat in baseball, like I was probably going 4 for 4. If I had a bad first at bat, it was a real mental struggle for me to let that at bat go. And it's good that your son's learning it at that age. And it's good that he's learning that what it takes to be successful, because it's different for everyone, right? Like there's probably one kid on his team that doesn't do extra work and he's probably lights out. And there's another guy that probably has to do 2 hours of extra work. And it's just good for those kids to go through those life experiences at such a young age and just learn how to compete.
One of the many, many beauties of baseball, right? Like you'll fail 7 out of 10 times and you're still an all-star, right? You just got to go right back up there and try and, take a hack at it again.
Jason, I wanted to kind of pivot this conversation to something I'm particularly very interested in, which is optimizing health performance and looking at like I wrote this down, like not just like recovery, nutrition, and fitness. Like we could talk about that. I'm particularly interested in like the most recent advances in medical care in terms of stem cells, in terms of different types of therapy works. I'm very interested in it, in particular for fighters, because, and Rogan talked about this briefly on his show, but my father-in-law actually just got done getting stem cells for his knee. So I had that experience and hearing how he's gone. Yep. We also work with a company called Blokes that does like peptides and testosterone replacement. And we are big advocates on getting blood work done. Nice. I don't think there's anything wrong with annually getting your blood work done, but I'm curious, like, what have you seen in terms of those like progressive therapy treatments and lessons learned there?
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of our sport and business. I work closely with BioAccelerator in Colombia. They've been amazing to me, our staff, and our agency and our athletes. I think they're one of the foregoing leaders in the stem cell market. And I know they're doing a lot right now, even for like CTE studies, for injury prevention studies and everything they're doing. And I've gone there twice now, and I've had amazing results. I've had clients go down there with amazing results. And so I'm a big believer in stem cell therapy. I think it's a huge thing. I think it's the future. I think it's going to be a game changer for athletes, especially if you can avoid surgery by getting stem cell treatments. I'm very particularly curious to see how we can prevent CTE, because the tests they're doing now, the studies they're doing now, I think that's the key, because we don't really have the bill for our sport yet, right? Like if you look at football, when they really started playing football like 1960s with helmets. Now I know not talking about the Leatherhead days. It took about 42 years for Daniel Webster in the CTE case to show up. We're at year 33. We don't really know what the cause and effect in our sport is yet. So I am really trying to put a lot of effort in studying into preventative, care and treatments and stuff. I know the peptides of the world that are out there right now are amazing. I've used BPC 157 in the past to heal some injuries.
How is that process, the BPC 157? What was your experience with that?
I had a shoulder injury, and I took BPC for, I think, 6 weeks, and it took about 3.5 weeks for me to really feel. I mean, it worked. I mean, it did amazing. I mean, I have tears on my shoulders that didn't need surgery. Wow.
Yeah. I'll let you keep going. So I'm sorry. I'm just very intrigued on this. So what else are you seeing besides the brain injuries, the peptides, the stem cell, anything else that we're unaware of that you think is up and coming there?
For just like, you mean like recovery or for?
Yeah, just like recovery. Yeah, I mean, if you're a guy, I mean, Gabe and I talk about this a lot. Like I train super hard, but most importantly, I want to be able to show up for my family. And so if I get injured or if I'm whatever, not only that, dude, I can't throw a baseball with my son like that. That would bother me.
Yeah, I think like for me, like the daily routine that myself and a lot of athletes are using are obviously like, sauna, cold plunge, hyperbaric chamber, red light therapy. These things are daily. You use the stem cells, you use the peptide therapy as necessary. All these things are very good, I think, for the recovery and keeping guys our age training every day. I know for the UFC athletes right now, I know peptides aren't allowed at the current moment. I know there's been some research done. I do think in the future that our drug testing program will allow, certain, like I think BPC 157. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I don't feel like there's a performance enhancing abilities with that drug. I think it's to really heal, right? To heal injuries and stuff of that nature. So I do foresee in the future that some of these things will be allowed. I think, I know a lot of guys are, NAD and a lot of vitamin pushes. A lot of these things are going to be very helpful for athletes.
I think the interesting part of the conversation too, that's always worth mentioning when we talk about this stuff is the basics need to be in order too, though, because I think sometimes people hear this stuff and they think that it can be a shortcut to just, getting sleep, hydrating, eating plenty of protein,
Like the blood work, I think, is the end all be all. I think the blood work is I get mine done every 3 months. I'm actually going today. It's funny you guys bring this up. Like you have to check and see what's under the engine and then adjust 100%. Accordingly. I think too many times the beauty of our society today is that all this stuff's readily available, right? You can have access to everything, but you need to test to see what you do and don't need, because too much of something can be bad. And I 100% agree with you. If I think any guys 30 and over, I think they should be doing these testing, every 3 to 6 months easily. And companies like Blokes are great. There's a lot of great companies out there that are really helping keep men at their prime and optimal health.
Yeah, I mean, because you brought it up, I mean, with Blokes, like we have a 50% off code in the podcast notes. Nice. And it's $75 for blood work. I mean, it's like, dude, it's so cheap that why wouldn't you go do that? And then check your hormone levels, right? You might find that your testosterone's crazy. And so for what you've witnessed with fighters, right, who are just getting beat up on a regular basis, what are they doing? I'm curious from a boxing and MMA perspective, when I look at it as an outsider, I feel like MMA is better. And this might be like, someone might be like, dude, you're an idiot. But I feel like MMA looks not as bad on the brain than boxing, just because of the repetitiveness in boxing versus like MMA. It's like, dude, you get hit right, you're getting knocked out. Is that true, or am I tripping?
No, you are. So it breaks down to a few factors. Like one, let's talk about like the training protocols, right? In boxing, when you spar, you only can go to the head or body. So when you are sparring in boxing a couple times a week or whatever it is, once a week, you're going repeated blows to the head. MMA training, which you have done, right? You're doing wrestling, you're not getting hit in the head. You're doing jiu-jitsu, you're not getting in the head. When you do striking, you can go to the legs, the body, you know what I mean? Like you can throw kicks. So you're not as only limited to the upper half of the body. So obviously that cuts the numbers down of strikes just in training. Go to the fight, the same thing, right? You have multitude facets of jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and then striking, and then even the striking, it's not just to the body and head, where boxing is only to the body and head. Secondly, when one of our guy gets hurt, if he doesn't intelligently defend himself, they stop the fight. Where in boxing, they give you an 8 count and they put you back up there. Like that's something that I think is, when that happens to me, or 10 count, whatever it is, sorry, that is horrible. Like that, the brain has already been concussed in that point a lot of times. And now you're going to put him back in there where he's not quite got his bearing back, and then let him continue to get hit in the head. So obviously I'm a fan of boxing. I'm not trying to put down boxing in any way, shape, or form, but to answer your question, MMA is a lot safer than boxing.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it. Go ahead, Gabe.
This might be a dumb question, but how much of a difference do the weight and size of the gloves play into that, or not much?
I don't think a whole lot. I mean, obviously I think it helps a little bit, but I mean, you're still taking repeated blows to the head.
Yeah. I had never looked at it through that lens. I really appreciate you sharing that, because when I look at it, it's like, I was boxing the other day, and now that you bring it up, it's like, yeah, that's all you're doing is you're working your jab, your crosses, you're working, trying to hit the head or the body. That's really it.
Yeah.
Versus when you're doing like an MMA or even just Muay Thai or whatever, right? You still have kicks, you have all kinds of, you have other weapons.
Yes.
And I hadn't thought about it through that lens. If you look at like the compound amount of times you get punched in the face over like, let's just say a month, I imagine it's significantly less than MMA just because you have other opportunities. Huh. All right. I appreciate that. That's cool.
I'm a huge boxing fan. So for all the boxing people watch, I'm not trying to compare, you know what I mean? Like put one down or the other. Like I love boxing is one of my loves as well. But yes, if anything, it's actually probably a testament to how tough boxers are, right? Like they are really engaging in, I mean, they're taking a lot of damage in those fights.
Oh man, dude. And you know, I'm sure you could speak to this, but there's just levels to the game, Jason. I'm sure you've seen this, but like I was boxing with a guy the other day. And he's just toying with me, you know, like he's just toying, like, or you're doing jiu-jitsu with one of the top level guys in the world, you know, whoever, and they could literally just toy with you, and you could be good against many people, but the top guys, there's just levels to the game, and I don't think people who aren't in the fight experience realize just how much someone who has trained extensively and is at an expert level can just really do whatever they want to you. And there's nothing you could do about it.
Like it's so like, I mean, I've been in this business now for what, 16 years, 15 years. And, but you're right. You go to like a UFC event and they have the workout rooms at the hotels, and it's like a who's in that room. And sometimes you get to roll with those guys and train with them. And you're like, oh my gosh, like this guy is like light years ahead of me. Like he is, it's such a humbling experience. You're like, wow, like he literally could do, like he could have rolled me up like a pretzel and sent me out of the room. And I could have done nothing to stop it. Like it's amazing just to see how good these athletes are. And again, our sport's not very old, right? Like, so you're seeing now, like you have the generation of kids that are start training it. Like the first UFC event happened when I was 9. There's kids now that, you know, like my nephew's in wrestling. He's 3. He's already doing jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? Like when he's 9, can you imagine how good he's going to be? Like, it's crazy that how fast the sport's evolving. And, but I love it. I love seeing kids learn self-defense at a young age. I love that they learn how to defend themselves and have that self-confidence. And I think it's good for them.
Dude, I agree.
Speaking of the sport evolving, you know, Jason started Train Hard. I work for the company. I write one of our training programs. We have a lot of people that want specific fitness for BJJ. We obviously have a lot of people that get on the mats and they want to improve their fitness specifically for that. At the level of the athletes that you're working to, like what has strength and conditioning look like that you have these top athletes doing? And then in your opinion, you know, as someone that's been in the space for so long, what should just baseline strength and conditioning look like for the average person that's looking to improve on the mats and specific to the sport?
So I think for the athletes, it's really, you know, getting a program that is like sustainable year round. So at some points, right, you're kind of periodizing it to peak for one night, right? So if you're to fight 3 or 4 times a year, you're putting together a program that you're going to peak, you know, those 3 or 4 nights in that time frame, you know, and adjusting accordingly to injuries, adjusting according to, you know, maybe body deficiencies or where certain areas need to get stronger, where you're focusing on your shoulders or your lats or whatever you need to, you know, fix on the upper body or lower body. So I think for the athletes, it's a huge component. You know, obviously, we have the UFC Performance Institute in Las Vegas, where these guys can come and, you know, it's like 3 or 4 days of testing. They can come like every 3 to 6 months and kind of like measure their markers, see where they're growing, see where maybe they still need to do some improvements. And I think that's the key. And I think strength and conditioning is a great protocol for our athletes because you can kind of get measurable results, right? You can see what is working and what isn't. For the weekend warriors like us that still want to compete, I always tell, you know, my friends that are doing jiu-jitsu, like, hey, like you have a strength and conditioning program, you know, get into the gym a few times a week. This will keep you on the mats. It'll keep you strong. And I'm a big believer in that. You know, one of the best things I ever did was I got with Justin King from Build Better in Arizona. And I mean, the protocols that he's put together for me with my training schedule, and he's constantly, you know, adjusting my calorie intake, my macros based on my training. He's constantly adjusting my training protocols. You know, like my strength and conditioning is based on how much I'm training. And I'm the healthiest I've ever been. Around like 2015, 16, 17, like in my early 30s, I broke down more than I'm breaking down now. Right now, I've been healthy for years. And I think it's just a matter of getting with the right people and prioritizing my health, both with my finances and with my time.
Dude, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I talk about this all the time at the gym. It's just so we own brick and mortar gyms. We also have an online training through Train Hard.
Nice.
And then I've been doing jiu-jitsu now for 9 years. And so I would just tell these guys, like, dude, if you want to be like, if you want to be resilient to injury, like, we have to strengthen your body as well. Like, I love jiu-jitsu and the technical capacity is incredible, but you also need to be building that strength and conditioning. And if you're not doing that, I just think you're going to be more susceptible to injury and you're not going to be able to last as long on the mats long term. So 100%. I'm glad to hear you say like the same thing. I want to dive in before we kind of close out. I want to talk about the role of faith. We briefly talked about this, but I think it's an important subject. It's something that Gabe and I have been exploring on this podcast quite a bit. I just got done reading. It's a book about the prodigal. It's a book about the prodigal son and how there's two different sons. And I actually had like a small Bible group around this particular subject. So it's very fresh in my mind about how people can approach faith and God in different ways. Mm-hmm. I'm curious how you approach your faith and what does that hold for you in your life?
I think it's for me, it's about keeping the main thing, and the main thing is my faith, and that's what everything is circled around. My marriage is circled around my faith, my business is circled around my faith, my relationships, everything has to be around my faith, and because I think in the day, like, we're servants, we're put on here on earth to serve and give, and I think when you keep it in that light, it makes life a lot easier. I think sometimes for example, in our business, they say like, hey, don't get attached to your clients. Don't love them too much. They're going to leave you. They're going to go to, other agencies, or they're going to break your heart. And I don't look at it like that, because I look at it through the lens of my father and my faith. And to me, that is, if God put that person in my life for 2 hours or 2 days or 2 years or 20 years, my job is to serve and give to the best of my ability, to be the best example I can be for him. And that is all that I'm trying to do, is just keep the perspective, because when you get caught up in all these worldly things, like, you can lose sight of your faith, and it can get you on a roller coaster that's not healthy to be in. By keeping your faith, you're centered on your faith. No matter what happens, what's important in your life, and you know what you're here for. And I think, especially in our sport, where adversity is guaranteed in our sport, our sport's going to break your heart on Saturday night. It's gonna take you to some lows. But if you have your faith, come Sunday, you'll know why you're here and what you're doing it for. And I think that's true too, because in professional sports, we count the wins and losses, and that's how we define ourselves. I'm not defined by wins and losses. I'm defined by who I am, as a son of God. And the truth of the matter is, it's what we use this platform for. That's what it's about. It's using this platform to make sure these guys have good lives after fighting. They found peace, contentment, that they know what their calling is in this world after fighting, because fighting is going to come to an end. If you fight till you're 35 or 40, you still have half your life to live. And so I think for us, it's a huge part of our agency. And I'm just, it's a constant work in progress. We all lose sight of it, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that there's times, my wife has to check me and be like, Jason, like, look how far God's brought you. 10 years ago, you're mad your guy lost. You didn't have a guy on the UFC this many years ago. Or you didn't have 5 guys on one card. You didn't have a guy in the main event. And so I constantly have to say, like, this is everything I prayed for, and I need to be content and show a lot of gratitude. Because I think a hard part of success, I know I'm kind of around me, is like, you want to be content and at peace and grateful for everything God's brought you to. But then what's made you great has also been constantly pursuing more, right? Constantly going after it. And it's like a constant battle that I personally have, that I'm still trying to figure out in my life, right? Like, there's times I really have to just take a moment and stop my day. Like, dude, I need to show gratitude for everything that's been bestowed upon me in my life. I'm very lucky and very blessed. And so I think that's the hard part in life sometimes.
For sure. I've been trying to be a lot more intentional about what you just said right now, because I, similar to you and similar to Gabe, like, want more, want to build, want to grow, want to get better, want to get fitter, want to get whatever, name the thing. Yep. I want to get better, right? I want to be the best husband, the best dad. Like, I'm not trying to be mediocre. And that's fine. That's great. It's a good mentality to have, but it also, at the same time, expressing gratitude for the growth you've had, and like what I'm currently on my journey on right now is creating a better relationship with God. That's what I'm currently doing. And I'm currently exploring it. We've been exploring this on the podcast for, I'd say, about 6 months to a year, Gabe. And It's an ongoing thing. I don't think it'll ever stop, but that's where we're at right now. But I love the way you explained it. And I'm sure a lot of your fighters have to find a deep rooted why as well. And I imagine for quite a few of them, it's faith driven, because it's a tough job, man. I mean, they're signing up for like one of the toughest jobs in the world.
I mean, this sport has that. I mean, you knock someone out in front of 1 million people and you're on top of the world, or you got knocked out in front of 1 million people and you just want to crawl in a hole and hide. And you really have to know who you are and what your core values are and what your moral compass stands for if you're going to be in this business, because otherwise you can't identify as a fighter. It's a very fleeting thing to identify as. And so I always try to help our athletes really figure out who they are and what they want to be about. You know, like I know what my identity is, and this is a part of my life. And I thank God every day that he allows me to be in this sport and do the things I do, but it's not me. It's not one of my pillars, right? Like my pillars are my faith, my family, my wife. Those are the things that are going to, you know, last long after the sport has come and gone in my life.
Mm. Well, Jason, I appreciate you, man. I want to be sensitive of your time. If you know, people listening and just like, all right, man, I could align with, like, I want to know more about Jason's story. I want to know more about what, you know, your business is doing. Where's the best place for them to go to find out more about your agency and about what you have going on? Yeah,
I mean, you can find us on all the social media handles. My social media handles are Jason K House. You also, we have iridiumsportsagency.com is our website, and you have, you know, our Instagram page for Iridium is pretty active as well. So they can follow us there. And I'm just very grateful for your guys' time. I've really been looking forward to speaking to you both. And I really like what you guys are doing. And it's an honor to be on your podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jason. We'll make sure to add those podcast show notes. And for everybody listening, you know, if you got value out of this, if you're like, dude, Jason's the man, make sure to share this episode with a friend, leave it a rating and review. And as always, keep training hard.